On this episode of Still Loading, this audio comes at a premium. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this new episode of the Still Loading podcast. I'm your host, Josh Koval, and today on the show, I have a wonderful guest lined up for you. We are going to be chatting about their history in the games industry in general, but also seeing where the conversation will take us. It's a little bit more of a loosey goosey episode, one that I don't do too often, but we're going to see where this goes. Joining me today is Barry Carenza, who is the host of the Nintendo Fuse podcast. He works at the website Nintendo Fuse. He also is one of the founders of Premium Edition Games, who is a game publisher. So, Barry, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for being on the show. I'm looking forward to chatting with you. So first off, since like I told the listeners at the top, it's a little more loosey goosey. So we're going to start off with a loosey goosey question. What you been playing?
It's great. So I just started Sonic Superstars today. Having fun with it.
Mm.
It's just a quicker playthrough, but it's almost like a palate cleanse because I just did Super Mario Wonder and 100% of that, and I did Spider-Man 2 and finished that. Did not 100%, but had a blast. And now I'm just awaiting Star Ocean 2. The remake is coming out later this week, and WarioWare is coming out later this week.
This year has been a really good year for games. It's been a lot of
Oh
great
my
games have come
God.
out.
This year has to be my favorite in a long time. It's just been nonstop.
And I don't think I've really played any of them. I don't have the time, unfortunately, or the funds to keep up with it all. There's just too much good stuff coming out. I really wanted to pick up Mario Wonder because I'm a huge Mario fan, but that and like who doesn't want to play as Elephant Mario? Like it just looks so fucking cool. But I couldn't justify the 60 or $70 or whatever Nintendo's charging for it now. For myself though, what I have been able to play is I've been playing actually recently for the podcast. I've been playing Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core, but on the PSP, not the remake, the original PSP title. Working my way through that because it's a patron poll, and then I also have been for kind of like the game that my comfort game right now. I feel like I don't know. Do you have a comfort game that just kind of shifts? Like when you're not playing anything else, there's just a game you always go back to. Is there only one, or do you kind of shift around from like game to game as your comfort game?
I play Final Fantasy 14, so I'll be like, all right, I'll go do some more stuff there in between other games. I love Theater Rhythm, and Final Bar Line came out earlier this year. So lately, I've been like, oh, I've got 10 minutes. I'll go play a couple songs and try and collect some cards. Those are probably my main two, other than I do Mario Kart Tour on the phone still. So I'll be like, oh, I got 10, 15 minutes. I'll do that.
So I've been hearing a whole bunch of Final Fantasy talk. I'm assuming you're a big Final Fantasy fan then.
Absolutely.
I'm gonna have to consider you for my. I don't know if you got a chance to listen to any of my episodes, but I did an episode earlier this year called the Final Fantasy Draft, where it's kind of like what happens when you mix fantasy sports with Final Fantasy. It's uh, it's like a 2.5 hour long. It's just wild. You just have to listen to it. It's
I'll have to
basically
check that out.
everyone's drafting. It's a lot of fun. It's where I have a couple guests on and they draft their quote unquote ideal Final Fantasy. So if just for example, if someone drafts Cloud as one of their party members, no one else can have Cloud at all in their draft, party member or otherwise. So it's works just like a sports draft, but obviously with Final Fantasy aspects. So I won't rehash the whole thing. Listeners have heard it before. There's actually two of them. There's one that came out this year and one from March of last year, I want to say. But yeah, I'm going to start doing them annually. So I'll have to. I have not come up with a slate of guests for 2024's. But anyway, the reason I brought up comfort games in the first place, and asking you about yours, my current one is Company of Heroes. Have you ever heard of that?
Of course, I've heard of it. Haven't played it, but I've heard of it.
I mean, I'm surprised not a lot of people know Company of Heroes, just because if you're not into RTSs, not everyone really looks out for it. But I adore that game. I'm awful at it. I'm not good at RTSs, but it's still a lot of fun. Um, so yeah, what I wanted to ask next was, you are the host of the Nintendo Fuse podcast, and you work at or you are part of the website Nintendo Fuse. So I kind of want to know, just how did you get your start there?
Yeah, so I'm one of the hosts. We have three co-hosts total. So yeah, I got started there over a decade ago. I was just on Twitter and just looking through one night, and one of the people who I followed was like, "Oh yeah, we're doing another episode for Nintendo Fuse," and they would always go live and be like, "Oh, listen live and call in and be a part of the show." And I was like, "Oh, that sounds interesting." So I listened. I was listening in. I called in. I got in the air. I got in the episode that way. And afterwards, I sent him a message. I said that was a lot of fun. I really liked that. So I don't know if you're looking for more hosts or anything, because I really like that. And they said, well, right now we're not, but we're always looking for reviewers and stuff for the website. So I said, yeah. So I joined the website and did reviews and press and news and stuff. And then I came on periodically on the podcast, and a few episodes later, they're like, you know what, you've been so good, like let's just come on. I was like, okay. And I think I've only missed 2 episodes in 10 years that we've done
Oh
it. And
wow.
we used to do it like periodically, like then it was like once a month, and then we actually got down to like once a week. And right now it's every other week. We do it 8:30 p.m. on Mondays. So this is an off week as we're recording this. We do it 8:30 p.m. Eastern, live on YouTube and Twitch, on camera, the whole 9 yards.
Mhm.
And the audio version's edited out, but the three of us, Steve and Greg are my other co-hosts. They're amazing guys and amazing friends, and we just have fun. We cover Nintendo news every other week, and what we've been playing and what's coming up, and any headlines, and we just have discussions about it, and we allow people who are watching live to chat in, and we read their comments on the air, and they become like a fourth person. And then afterwards, if you listen afterwards, leave comments and we'll reply, and we just have a good time. So we've been doing it. I've been part of it. I think they've been doing it for like 15 years total, 12 or
Oh
15 years,
wow.
and I've been doing it, just over a decade with them. But it's been a blast.
That's wild. I am on the website now. I didn't realize they started back as in like early 2006 under a different name. We
Yeah, we.
Nintendo as it was, but
Hmm.
uh
Yeah, so
that's
it's been
that's
around for
crazy.
a long time.
I can't even imagine doing that's awesome. So with covering only Nintendo news, and I'm assuming is Nintendo your current, like, out of the big 3 up there, Nintendo's your go-to, I'm assuming.
I play on all of them. I own them all. I don't fuel console wars because I think they're silly, but
Agreed.
I do like, of the three big first parties, Nintendo holds the closest spot to my heart because of growing up, and I love the characters. So in that regards, yes, but I play so many third party and first party from other games. Like I mentioned, I just played Spider-Man 2. I will absolutely not hold myself to just Nintendo titles. I enjoy games on all systems, and just games across the board because it's a
Well,
great industry.
I meant more or less, like, do you like, is when I say gravitate, I don't mean only play that, but I mean, like, do you have, like, for example, I don't consider myself this now, but I was a Sony fan, probably. I would think that was my favorite ecosystem. Now I would actually say it's more Nintendo. Like, I'm not saying, they don't no other console holds good options. I love the exclusives on PlayStation. I haven't really touched my Xbox in a while, though. I was
Same.
playing Ori and the Blind Forest somewhat recently, but yeah.
Yeah,
So
last
it
thing I
was
was in
more or less
Xbox,
like,
I think, was Diablo 4.
man, I haven't even touched Diablo. I don't think I even got that game yet. Is it any good?
I enjoyed it, but I hate that it's always online, even if you're single player. Like, I get why they did that,
Yeah.
but I'd like to be able to play single player games without an internet connection and without paying a subscription fee.
Yeah, so you need to have Xbox Live to play
Hmm.
Diablo single. That is the dumbest.
Or
Oh
PS
my.
Plus, and that's probably that's actually the reason I played on Xbox is because I still have Xbox Live from the Xbox days. It still like recurs, and like I was like, all right, like since I have that, I don't have PS Plus because I don't play a lot of online stuff. I'm like, I'll do the Xbox version because I already have Xbox Live.
That's wild. That is the dumbest thing I think I've heard. Like, all right, I'm gonna have to hold in a rant on that. That's like a good mini episode for me to rant about for the Patreon. Um,
Well, Diablo 3 was
so
like that too, except for the Switch version. The Switch version
really,
does not need online for single player because of the portability, and otherwise you wouldn't be able to play it if you were just walking out in the street. So the PS4 version and the PC version, because they did the whole auction house and Diablo 3, you need an online connection to play single player. But the Switch version, which does have the DLC and the expansion and all that, you can play it online still, but you can also play it single player without any internet.
the always online thing is one of my biggest pet peeves of modern gaming. Like I don't mind having everything be connected, but the necessity of it having to be connected, it'll never sit right with me. It just never does.
I agree, 100%.
And that kind of leads me then to the like not really the second half but like the second half of your job of like what you kind of do in the games industry is you are one of the founders of Premium Edition Games, which is you say like it's a publisher that does small runs of I don't actually how small, or is it like small runs of games, or is it do you just publish on demand? Like how exactly does that work?
We do so yeah, I'm a founding member with a bunch of others. We got together to make we do physical publishing of digital only titles, and
Hmm.
we are not limited in that regards. Like we do open pre-orders, so we want to make sure that we print enough for the initial demand, and we print extra because there's always people that miss out on pre-orders or don't hear about us until after a pre-order is ended. And we do a lot of conventions, so we're at conventions and we sell games. We want to make sure we have copies of games available, but we do have special editions like retro editions and deluxe editions that are limited. Those are more for collectors. But yeah, we will print as many as needed, to meet the demand, and they're all official. It's official through Nintendo, through Sony. They are ESRB rated, part of the official library.
Now, listeners, believe it or not, this Barry did not come on the podcast just to promote premium edition stuff. We actually reached out just to kind of hang out on mic, shoot the shit for a little bit,
Hmm.
and see where our conversation goes. But the reason I wanted to ask about it is I'm not as he's mentioned off mic. I don't know, like I always feel like I need to have some type of focus of my show. So instead of just kind of random banter, but the other half of that though, I'm genuinely curious about a lot of the stuff that goes into like what you do at Premium Edition Games, because ever since I won't name the competitor which must not be named just for just to keep in line with that, but like um ever since they kind of grew in popularity, there's been a lot of you guys popping up, and I'm always curious about like the ins and outs of it, because I feel like it's such an interesting business model to take digital only games and make them and give the devs who work so hard on their game a physical release, something that they can see in their hands, which I think personally I think is really cool. So I wanted to ask, like, what what kind of things do you look for in a game when deciding to publish it? Is it sales numbers? Is it a specific genre? Is there any type of like criteria? You don't have to give away the criteria. I'm sure that's proprietary, but is there like some type of criteria they have to meet?
No, it's absolutely none of that. We don't look at sales numbers. We don't look at any of that because we don't care. What we care about is games that are fun, games that are, excite us, games that we really enjoy. So we will test every game we put out, and the team will play it and vote on it. And sometimes we have games that we love, but we know we're tougher sales, so we have to pass. Unfortunately, either they're too quick, they might not have a longevity or stuff like that, or they're just tough genres. I mean, there's certain genres that just do not garner as much attention as others, and that's unfortunate because there's some great games that a lot of people have unfortunately never heard of. And then there's others that we say, yeah, let's talk about it, let's try and do it. And as long as the team loves it, we put out usually between 6 and 8 games a year. So
Hmm.
we go slowly, and what we want to do is we want to highlight those games and highlight the developers behind the games and give them the attention. And we don't want to just flood, here's game, 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 because that's the problem with a lot of it with the eShop, right? If you go to eShop any single week, every week, there's 10 to 15 to 20 games every week. And so many of these games, they sink if unless it
Hmm.
gets featured, they sink. You don't hear about it. You don't realize they're out.
Yep.
And there's so many things. You go to eShop. What do you usually pick? Like the featured. Let's see what's featured. Let's see what's out there. You probably will never know to search for this particular game. So we uh, we give them kind of a second life, and we want to give them the attention. So we highlight them, we advertise them, we show them off. We want the developers to get that attention that they deserve. So, we look at it as a more tightly knit family. So, any game that comes under our umbrella, is part of the family, and we're really proud of them, and hopefully they're proud of us and what we do. And it's always great when the developers get a hold. They get their copies of their game when they're assembled and manufactured, and they say, "Oh, I got it in the mail, and it exceeded my expectations." And that's what we shoot for at Premium. We want to exceed everyone's expectation in terms of our packaging, in terms of the quality, in terms of what we you know bring in, because that's what we do. We're not the rock stars. The real rock stars are the developers and the digital publishers who find these games first and
Hmm.
get them out there. And then we just put a pretty bow on it. But we want to put the prettiest bow possible so that everyone loves it. And we try and get the game complete on cart or disc, and preserve it physically, because game preservation is important to us. And but the real rock stars are the developers themselves, and that we work with some absolutely fantastic developers, and it's a true honor.
For the one thing you mentioned earlier on, it just made me think. What's you don't have to list them all, but like, what's a genre of games that just in general you find has been a hard sell before, like that you wouldn't like. You don't have to name any specific games. I don't want you to shout it because
No, no,
devs
I
work
mean,
hard on
like,
those.
yeah, but like, well, you mentioned real time strategy, right? Real time strategy is
Yeah.
not a very widely even known, kind of genre. In the '90s, I mean, we had Warcraft, Starcraft, and like Command and Conquer, but those have kind of gone away. I mean, more people now know Warcraft because of WoW than they do for Warcraft 1, 2, or 3, like their actual real time strategy roots. So I feel like that, for example, is a genre, and I love RTS. I grew up with Warcraft and Starcraft, and it's just one of those where it's like, okay, like that is a tougher, like the average Joe probably isn't interested, and it sucks
No,
because
you're
there's some
right.
great games.
As much as it pains me to agree, you're probably right.
Same with like point and click. I love point and click. I grew up with the Lucas, film adventure series, like Monkey Island and Day of the Tentacle and Maniac Mansion and Sam and Max. So great, great games. And we even had like a kind of resurgence a little bit with like Thimbleweed Park recently, or more. I say that it was like 2017 it came out, 20. But it's still the average Joe is going to be like, "Ah, bored." I mean, Telltale did well for a little bit, and even they went under, and they had
Hmm.
big IPs. So it's kind of like looking at that stuff, and it's like, It sucks. But that's not to say we won't do those games, because we absolutely will. If you find one that we really absolutely speaks to us, versus something like a platformer or an RPG or an action RPG or first person shooter or stuff like that. Those are usually genres that sell more, just in the grand scheme. They're more popular, more people know about them.
They're also better on home consoles. Like RTS games are a little bit rougher on home. Like Switch, I think has some because of the touchscreen that you can kind of make it work, but in general, it's a lot harder. I feel like in control scheme wise on a home console. But it's interesting. You said like I agree with you. RTS still a pretty niche genre. We're not in the '90s anymore. However, I will say Age of Empires 2 has been making a resurgence on Twitch. In the past couple of years or so, there's a streamer named T90 who he had this tournament called the Hidden Cup Tournament, which I don't know. Have you ever heard of T90 or the Hidden Cup Tournament?
No, I have not.
He's coming back to Twitch. He was on Facebook Gaming for 2 years, but he's coming back to Twitch in November. Which by the time this comes out will be a month past, but he's coming back to Twitch in November, and he did this thing called the Hidden Cup Tournament, where what it was, he would get 8 of the top ranked Age of Empires competitive players. Age of Empires 2 Definitive Edition is what they use. Age of Empires 2 players, and then he'd have there'd be 8 invites, and then there would be 8 play-ins. So other professional players, or like players who play competitively, can compete in some like basically buy-in rounds type of thing, and he will, or I shouldn't say buy in, but compete to like play in rounds. That's the word I'm looking for. And they can then, whoever's the top 8 of those play ins will then get to participate in the Hidden Cup. And the reason it's called the Hidden Cup is because all 8 or 16 of those players, you don't know who is who. Like they give them all aliases and different, it's, like Joan of Arc, like all based off history stuff since it's Age of Empires. So no one knows who each other is. None of the players know who each other are. The broadcasters who are streaming it don't know who the players are. The most you can do is look at the players' strategies. Like they'll analyze all the players' strategies, and when they show up in games, like, oh, like Hera likes to do this, this, and this a lot. Like 80% of the time. So this is a high percent chance that it could be Hera playing this, or the Viper is doing this, or something along those lines. So it's a complete mystery until the entire cup runs its course. All 16 competitors go in, get knocked out, and it's a massive like 3 or 4 day event where they commentate for like, I want to say, like it starts at like noon and ends at like 8 p.m. or something like that, or maybe even like 10 a.m. goes to 8 p.m. Like it's a long day. It's like 8 to 10 hours. um and they'll play through all the matches. They'll play through all of the first round matches, I want to say, over like the first like day and a half, and then the second round and third round matches kind of take place and on the second day, and then the fourth day. It's hard to explain. It might be 4 days actually, but it's a long event. And he hasn't had one in a couple of years because he switched over to Facebook Gaming and his numbers dropped. But he was pulling in, I want to say, like over 100,000 people on one of the Hidden Cup tournaments. Like it's been getting some numbers, which is surprising. Still doesn't mean RTS is back as a genre, but it's kind of cool to see. That long-winded tangent brings me all the way around to say it's kind of cool to see RTS kind of getting a little bit of a resurgence.
Hey, that's great. I mean, I think all genres do that. They kind of go through little bits of resurgence, and it's great to see that. I'd love to see because I don't necessarily say the community ever dies, because it's more niche, but it's nice to see more people take notice and kind of go out of their comfort zone, because I think growing up in the 80s, you know genres were being invented. So it was like, oh, there's no
Mhm.
game like this, let's try this. Where kids today, they've got 40 years worth of gaming in the past. So if they play a game, let's say they play Legend of Zelda and they really like it, well, they don't have to wait a year or two for the next Zelda game. They've got decades upon decades worth of Zelda games they could bounce to. And then if they play all the Zelda games and still want more and there's not a new Zelda out, they could play the decades upon decades of Zelda-like games or Zelda clones, and there's a ton of them. So they can stay with
Mhm.
one genre almost for their entire life. So I'm not saying that people don't branch out, but there's less of a reason to try games outside of genres you really like because there's so many games in each genre at this point.
That's very true. That's very true. What do you think is something that, like, because this isn't this could trend into like an ageist like territory, and I never want to be that old man that yells at cloud type of thing. But what do you think is one of the biggest benefits of modern gaming for people growing up now? And then conversely, what's someone that one of the biggest like drawbacks? That's the word I'm looking for. One of the biggest drawbacks. So benefits
Well,
and drawbacks.
I'd say one of the biggest benefits is just having games and having the options upon options and upon options. And I think one of the drawbacks is too many options.
Mm. Choice
As
choice
too much choice.
paralysis, as they call it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, "Oh, I don't know what to choose." That and I think there are a group of people who will play a modern game, and then they get hypercritical about anything that doesn't look as good. "Oh, I don't wanna play an 8-bit game because it doesn't have hyper realistic graphics. It's not in 3D." And they're
Why is
missing
there
out.
not ray tracing on your
Yeah.
Nintendo game?
Yeah, and they're missing out on classic. And then they get hypercritical of modern games where it's like, "Oh, well, this game looks better than that game, so that game instantly sucks because it doesn't look as good." Well, you don't even play it yet. Like, play it.
Mhm.
Graphics aren't everything, and I think that's something you learn as you get older is gameplay is more important than graphics. I'm not saying graphics don't enhance a game, but I
Oh,
would
yeah.
rather play an ugly game that plays well and is fun than a beautiful game that I'm bored to tears and plays like crap.
100%, I'm with you on that, and it's frustrating because I feel like part of the beauty of the modern era is all the content that surrounds games, like, outside of the game itself, and the reason I bring that up is because you were talking about graphics and how people's obsession with fidelity can be a hindrance. And there's a YouTube channel, oh my gosh, Digital Foundry, and
Mhm.
they do amazing stuff. Have you ever watched their stuff?
Yeah, yeah, they do. It's a lot of great stuff.
Yeah. I love what they do in terms of the tech specs, but I feel, and this is not their fault, just to be clear, but I feel like a side effect of doing that, of really analyzing the visual and tech breakdowns of every single game, it's kind of cultivated that culture you were talking about before of being so hypercritical of the visuals, you know?
Oh, yeah. Well, it's like if you walk into a Best Buy, like right now, and you go to the TV section, you're going to see a wall of TVs. You can walk into a Walmart or Target or whatever, you're going to see the same thing. And if you're looking to buy a TV and price isn't an issue, it's going to be a lot harder for you to buy because you're going to look at all the TVs and go, well, this one's slightly sharper, and this one's slightly brighter, and this one has a little more rich color. And you're comparing them
Mhm.
all when in reality, no matter which one you buy and you take home, it's going to look fantastic because you're not comparing it immediately to others right next to it. You're only looking at that one TV. And
Yeah.
if you buy the one that has slightly less bright colors than the other one that has slightly brighter colors, you're not going to pay attention to that when you're watching your favorite show or movie or playing your favorite game because the colors are going to look great. And I feel a lot of people when it's like, "Oh, which system do I buy this for?" will look at things like Digital Foundry. And if you look like say the Switch and the PlayStation 5 and like, "Oh, look, the Switch one loads like like 0.2 seconds slower." And and maybe the graphics aren't as sharp as the PS5. And you're seeing them side by side, you go, "Oh yeah, well the PS5 is going to be the better one." But if you just buy the Switch version and play it, you're not going to notice that. You're not going to care because
Mhm.
you're not comparing it in real time to another version. And maybe you might notice the loading time, but if it's that minute, it's not going to be that big of a deal. And if it was that big of a deal, then you just buy the PlayStation version or the PS5 version.
And that's where I feel like you really what should be the deciding factor for the person is just like what, in all honesty, like as long as it runs, which you can look at Digital Foundry and see like, is there like major frame rate issues? I'm not talking about a couple frame drops. I mean like unplayable frame rate issues. You could look at stuff like that, but if it doesn't, as long as it doesn't have that form factor, like what do you, how do you want to experience the game? Do you want to experience it for the handheld experience? Then you want to probably get it for Switch if it's available. If you don't care about that, if you like the home experience, then what controller do you feel most comfortable with? I personally always
Yeah.
have preferred the PlayStation stuff, but that's just my personal preference. Like if you like Xbox because of the online things, then get it for Xbox. Like I don't know. To me, like I pick a system based off just whatever my interest is in that during that point in my life, and then that's what I buy it for. Like I don't. There's no need for this unnecessary tech comparisons. As long as it can run on the system, that's it. That should be the end all be all. But it is weird to me that there is so much nitpicking with that, and it ties into, unfortunately, and once again, no, this is not me throwing shade at Digital Foundry because I like what they do, but it lends into the thing that we you brought up before, the console war bullshit, where people just feel this bizarre loyalty to a giant corporation that doesn't even know they exist.
See, the console war thing is always funny because console war started back with the Atari and television. And it started, as marketing. It was literally marketing going against each other, trying to say their product is better. And then, of course, the 8-bit, really Sega and Nintendo didn't go after each other, but it was the 16-bit that really ramped it up in terms of commercials and advertisements, with Sega going after Nintendo, Nintendo going after Sega, Atari going after both of them. It was quite interesting to look back on and see. And of course, post the 16-bit, there was, Sony and Sega and Nintendo definitely got into it. I mean, the Crash Bandicoot commercials with the guy in the Crash tube with
Yep.
the megaphone yelling at Nintendo headquarters outside, while Nintendo sends a VHS of a Sony and a Sega rep, kidnapping a Nintendo rep and tying him up to tell the secrets about the Rumble Pack and Star Fox 64. I mean, the whole
Hmm.
thing, looking back on it, is funny because it's marketing. And I think if you're a kid, as kids, you don't have a lot of money. You don't, you get what you get at Christmas. And if your parents got you a Sega Genesis or a Master System, you had to champion it because you wanted to feel like you had the superior, like, oh, you weren't missing out. And versus the kid who had the NES or the Super Nintendo. And then that poor kid with the Jaguar and the Lynx is like, oh, me, yay. But it's just funny because as you grow up and you grow older, you have more income and you could buy all the systems. You realize just how foolish it is. It's really that it's not championing for a company that doesn't, because the company doesn't give a shit about you. It's pretty much
Exactly.
reassuring yourself that I made the right decision buying this particular console or this game for this console, and I'm not missing out on the best experience that other people are having. And in reality, you should stop caring about what other people are doing and just enjoy what you have and enjoy playing the games. And I think social media has hindered that because that's all anyone wants to do is we want to come on and either they'll praise a game, and if someone's praising a game, someone always has to put in the comments, "Oh, this game sucks. You have terrible taste. Oh God, grow up." Or if you hate a game and you post, you have to post, "I have to hate the game," and then people will say, "Oh, you're crazy. I love the game." Blah, blah. It's like no one cares. Just love what you love, hate what you hate, but just enjoy. Like life is so short. The
And
Sony,
there's no need
Sega,
to like
Nintendo, Microsoft, no one gives a shit. Like they don't care.
and there's no need to shit on someone for their own personal preferences. Like there's absolutely, like it makes no sense. Like let people like what they like. There's no reason to, I don't know. I have no issue with people bringing like criticism to games, like that's what I talk about it on my podcast, like I'll do deep, when I do deep dives, I'll talk about the aspects of a game that I like and that I dislike. It's funny. I was actually listening to one of my good podcasting friends, Retro Hangover. They recently released a 3.5 hour episode on the original Dark Souls,
Mhm.
and I am famous for not liking that game in the slightest. I have various reasons for it. I'm not going to rehash it here, but I loved listening to it because when they offered praise for it, it wasn't just like the whole get good moniker that you always see with Dark Souls fan and Soulsborne fans and shit like that. But they had very thoughtful analysis where they're talking about what they like. They also had thoughtful analysis of what they didn't like, and I much rather have that approach. Like, and at the very least, if you listen to it and you still don't agree with it and you still don't like the game, then at that point you're just like, all right, well, it's not for me, but I'm glad it speaks to you. I'm glad it does something for you. It's a weird thing where people will now shit on stuff just for the sake of shitting on something. Like they need to be correct with their opinion as opposed to just letting people like what they like. Sorry, I didn't mean to go on
Hey,
a
no,
soapbox with this.
you're 100% right. People like to justify their opinions, and they don't have to justify their opinions because they're their opinions. If I like a game, I like a game. It could be the most hated game in the world. It could get 1.0, but if I like it, I like it. Maybe it's a guilty pleasure, but I still like it. And if you like it, then you like it. Who cares what other people say? If you're playing a game going, boy, I hope everybody likes this game, otherwise I shouldn't like this game, then you probably should be seeking help because you should be enjoying what you enjoy. And if you say, hey, I only like to play Call of Duty. That's all I play. I love Call of Duty. I like first person shooters. That's it. I don't want to we're talking about genre earlier. I don't want to go into real time strategy or point and click or platforming or whatever. I just want to play this. You know what? You do you. Enjoy yourself. If you're having fun, then that's what this industry is about. Having fun. They're games. So enjoy it. Don't shit on other people because they don't like the new Call of Duty. Don't shit on other people because they don't like first person shooters. Just enjoy what you like. Enjoy, say, hey, look, I'll enjoy this game for this. If you don't enjoy it, great. But I enjoy it and I'm having fun. That's it. But you don't even need to broadcast it. I think social media gave people this need, this desire to broadcast their lives. I mean, how many people go to restaurants? You see them taking pictures of their food. Look, I'm eating
Yeah.
this now. I don't care what you're eating. You're obviously alive. And if you're alive, that means you're consuming substance. So you have to be eating. I'm assuming you are eating. I don't need to see it. Unless we're going out to dinner together, then I'll see your food because it's on the table with me. I don't need to see it. It's the same with games. I like when people say, here's what I'm playing. I just beat this. I do it myself. I do it not to, get any type of craziness, but to spark conversation. Oh, I was thinking about that game. What did you think? Oh, yeah, here's what I think. Make your own decision. But not to say, oh, yeah, people say, oh, that game sucks. Why'd you play that? Boom. I'm not even going to bother with you because I don't care. And that's it. You shouldn't care. People care more about what other people think than themselves. And it's crazy.
I don't really have that much of an issue if people like post pictures of their food per se, because it's like if like I don't know, that stuff never bothered me, especially if people cook their own stuff. But I can
That's different.
understand, but I can understand your point though of like people needing posting for the sake of needing validation, which to be fair, we all kind of do, but it's when you base your entire life around that validation versus just enjoying it as a passer. You know what I mean? Like, and I've found myself guilty of this. Like if I put like a lot of thought into like a post where I have some like I posted about I'm getting the validation that I seek, but I posted earlier today, I got pitched like 2 years ago uh a guest spot to cover sex toys tied with video games. One of the wildest pitches I've ever been.
Interesting.
It was a video game that you could sync your sex toy up to, and it's an RPG. So it was nuts. And I posted about it because I was hoping to get people's reaction and that validation. Now, where that can get unhealthy is if that ruined my day because it didn't get enough likes. That's where you have to be careful. And I'd be lying if I wasn't guilty of it. I'd be lying if I said that like, oh, like no, I never do that. No, there'd be times where I'll post and I don't get the likes or whatever that I was hoping for or some type of feedback that I was hoping for. And then I'm bummed out about it. And then I realized, like, why am I being depressed over this? This is like, I'm not, this isn't my life. This is just something that I do for fun. So, some people find it fun just to post the shit that they like, and they don't get any validation necessarily out of it. They just like to share. And I don't know.
And that's fine, you know, I have no problem with that at all. But I know there are other people that absolutely do, where they're like, "Oh, I need that validation. I need to know that the game I'm playing is great." Like, how many people will be excited for a game and then the reviews come out and they're like an 8 out of 10 and they go, "Oh, well, I was expecting a 9. I'm gonna pass on it for now. It's not worth it." It's like, it's an 8 out of 10. It's still good. Like, what are you expecting? You know, you could still have fun. I've seen people say like, "Oh, well, it's only 20 hours. That's not worth $60." And
That
I'm
is
like,
such a weird,
"What?"
like the price, whatever the cost of, I forget the term for it. The Yeah, I can't stand that. If a game, no, don't get me wrong. If I'm spending $60 and it's a 5 hour game, it depends on what the game is. But like, uh, so for example, like Call of Duty, I used to I stopped buying Call of Duties when they were new because I never really played the multiplayer, which is really where you get most of that $60 value from. And I stopped playing it because I only played the single player, and the single player was never good enough to warrant a $60 value. Um, at least in my opinion, everyone's different. Some people love it. Some people, I actually had a friend of mine who said he would spend 20 hours on the campaign because he would literally explore every nook and cranny of that 5 hour campaign, like every single corner. And that's how he got his enjoyment. And I wish I was a better person at the time. I was like, why are you wasting your time with that? Move on to the next game. But when I should have been more supportive, like, if that's what you like doing, that props to you, man. Like, if you can find 20 hours of enjoyment out of a 5 hour campaign, that should be lauded as opposed to me who was just shitting on it at the time. But I was also in my early 20s, and you're not always the kindest person in your early 20s.
Well, here's what it is. I think when you again going back to like growing up as a kid, especially in the 80s and in the 90s, you know, you only got a few games, every couple months or Christmas or
Yeah.
birthdays or whatever. So when you're limited to what you have, you make the most of it. You will sit there and you'll beat it, and then you'll say, "Well, I'm going to beat it again on a harder difficulty," and you'll master it, and you'll do, you go for all the cheat codes, or you go for 100%, or you do what you squeeze as much enjoyment out of that game because that's all you have until the next set of games come out. Or at that point you like trade with a friend or something, be like, "Oh, you play it for a while, let me play that." Um, that I totally get. And now, I used to do that too growing up. Absolutely. Now I don't. Like I 100% in Mario Wonder because I did have fun with it. But, Spider-Man 2 was like it was too much. It was too much to
Hmm.
100%, all the side stuff. But I still did the story because there's so many games now that, you know, you can jump right to the next game. You have it at options. I mean, even if, especially if like you're a PC gamer, I mean, how many people did Steam sales and are sitting on like thousands of games that they got
I
for a
have like
dollar?
400, or not that much. I have like a couple hundred in my Steam library though that I've barely played half of them.
Exactly, exactly. So there's if right now, like right this second, someone hit stop on game development forever. That's it. No more games. As of this moment, any game that has not been made is never getting made. Every game that's released is what's released, and that's it for the end of time. There is not enough time for you or me or anybody else listening to this to play through every game that has been released before you die. There's not. There's too many games already
Yep.
released across every system. You will not play through them all. So with that, it's one of those things where if you have a backlog, and many gamers do, you might get hooked into a game and say, "I'm going to put 150 hours into this game." And there's nothing wrong with that. Enjoy the hell out of it. Or you say, "You know what? I put in 15 hours. I had fun. I saw what I wanted to see." Or even 5 hours. I put in what I wanted to see. I got my enjoyment out of it, and I'm ready to move on. There's no reason you should force yourself to keep playing. Move on. So if someone takes a 5-hour game and says, I'm still playing it and I'm going through it and I'm just having fun with it over and over again, that's fantastic because the important thing is they're having fun. And that's what we all should be doing at the end of the day.
Do you think that is kind of ties back with like the question I asked before about like the difference, like the best thing about modern games and the worst thing about like the things that modern gamers are missing out on and type of thing? I feel like sometimes, not all the time, mind you, because we have the luxury of choice now, or maybe the burden of choice, depending on how you look at it. But I wonder if like how much of it is like there's a game where now if the game gives you a little bit of, I shouldn't say the slightest bit of pushback, because obviously the Soulsborne games have proven that people do like challenging but fair games. Um, I feel like though it's a lot like people bounce off of games, even not even because of difficulty. It doesn't spark interest, like a crazy amount of interest right away, so you just kind of move off on it. And I feel like sometimes that is a detriment, where if you can push through a section that might not necessarily be the best for you, like you don't enjoy all that much, and even if it's a long section. And I use the example of Red Dead 2. I couldn't stand Red Dead 2 when I first started it. I don't know what specifically about it I didn't enjoy, but I didn't enjoy it. And it took me pushing through like the first like 4 or 5 hours of the game to finally get my teeth, like sink my teeth into it. And then I became hooked. And now I consider it one of my favorite games of all time. And those first 4 or 5 hours that I hated, I actually really enjoy now. So I sometimes I wonder if one of the things that we are missing out on is that is because we have so much choice, it's a lot easier to make the decision just to move off on a game than to sit with it, try it a little bit longer, push through it. Now, I'm, still silver, like it's a fine line. Don't necessarily torture yourself with a game you despise, but if it's just something that you're, disliking for a little bit, like I feel like people, and I put myself into this category, I feel like people push off of games a little bit too easily now. And if we didn't have as much choice, sometimes I wonder if we'd be able to explore games more fully and learn a little bit more about them, you know?
I 100% agree, and I'm 100% guilty of it. I just did it recently. Super Bomberman R2 came out. Big Bomberman fan. I put the cartridge in, booted it up, boot up story mode, all excited, new Bomberman adventure. And the first thing I have to do is defend these creatures from villains. And I noticed one huge glaring problem in this game is the fact that you could walk through and enemies could walk through your bombs. And that was like a staple of Bomberman is you would trap yourself and accidentally kill yourself. Like bombs were immovable objects unless you had like the bomb kick or the bomb throw. That was the point of them. Now you could just walk right through. So like, oh, I better defend. I'm gonna put these bombs down, and oh, the enemies are just walking through the bombs. Like nothing. And I was like, this is not Bomberman. And then after I succeeded, it was like, oh, now we're entering the I was called a castle where it was like a tower defense. And I just turned the game off. I was like, this is no, I don't, I'm not feeling it. I'm not having fun. This does not feel like the Bomberman I love. And I moved on. And just like that. And will I ever go back to it? Probably someday. But it left such a sour taste in my mouth, and there was such an option of choice that I moved on. And unfortunately, I moved on to Detective Pikachu Returns, which I did enjoy, but I quit halfway through. And I quit halfway through because it was too easy. And I usually play games on like story difficulty because I want to see the story and enjoy. But what I mean by too easy is I love detective games. I love like Danganronpa, Phoenix Wright, Mystery Detective Archives, Raincode just came out, or Master Detective Archives.
Mhm.
Fantastic games. And whenever you play those games, you have a mystery, and you're like, oh, it's going to be person A. And by the time the truth is revealed, it's person Z. And you've gone through all the, oh, then it's this person, oh, this changed, like all these evidence. It keeps you on your toes and excites you. And Detective Pikachu Returns, it was like, oh, it's probably this. And it has to be this, right? Like, no way it's this. There's got to be some spin. And after an hour and a half of gameplay, it's like, oh, no, it's this. It's this. Yep, exactly. You knew it. You knew it 5 minutes into the case. And I was like, that's no fun. I'm
Yeah,
now wasting time to get around to the solution that I already know.
That I feel like that's a different story though when like with the Bomberman example, it's that completely changed up your expectation of the gameplay, whether that's good or bad. Maybe you'll come back to it, like in a year or so, and now that you know that it's a different type of gameplay mechanic, maybe you'll find some other different emergent gameplay or some other type of mechanic. You're like, okay, I understand what they're going for with this now, and now I can enjoy it. Not saying that'll happen, but
Yeah.
it leaves open the possibility for that. Versus with Detective Pikachu, it's like this is it's not just like the game didn't like resonate with me at the moment. It was just poor. I don't want to say poor, like bad because I didn't play it, but like when you specifically for mystery games, I think this is specific to a mystery game, which obviously Detective Pikachu is. If you're able to figure out the mystery in the first little bit and the rest of the game continues on like that, then it's the same thing in like a movie where like the tension is all gone. If the audience already knows what the main plot twist is and all the characters in the movie do not, that makes it that it's a lot harder for a movie to make itself interesting when the
Yep.
audience knows more than what the characters on screen do. So now you're just waiting for them to figure out shit that you already figured out. And same with Detective Pikachu. You already know who the villain is, and now you're just waiting for. And it's even almost arguably worse in a game because a game isn't an hour and a half or 2 hours. It's
Well,
like a 30-hour experience, and
well,
you're
let me
just
let me
waiting for them to
clarify.
catch up.
I'm talking per case because there's multiple cases. Like the overarching story, I have no
Oh,
idea. But per because there's multiple chapters and there's cases per chapter, and then an overall story that's happening behind the scenes that it's building to. But I never even got to fully experience that part because I was just so turned off by the individual cases. And it's not that it was like I knew the answer right away. It was that characters were making dumb decisions despite knowing that. I'm gonna spoil one of the early cases of Detective Pikachu, and I'm gonna say that because it illustrates my point. But I mean, if you really want to play it, I'm sure you would figure this out instantaneously. And it's definitely geared more towards kids in that regard. So I plan to go back to it with my son down the road when he's older, because I think it'll be a good introductory to mystery style games. But as somebody who plays a lot of them, it's different. So the case is there's a missing item. Okay, someone has this item. Where could it be? Okay, that's a mystery. There's been a robbery and you're going through the whole 9 yards. And then you find out one of the people that had access to it or potential access to it has a Cramorant. And if you don't know that Pokemon is a blue bird that swallows things. And you go and find that Cramorant, and he's complaining about a stomach ache. And they talk about how Cramorant you can swallow things and forcibly spit them back up. That's what Cramorant does in the Pokemon games, and that you can absolutely do that. You can make Cramorant do it. So now this Cramorant is, oh, I'm full. I've got a really tummy ache. I don't know. And if you have half a brain, you probably have guessed where this item is right now. You probably, just based on my what I just said, you probably have a good idea. So you would think you're looking for a missing item. This person potentially could have taken it. Their partner Pokemon is a Cramorant who's complaining about stomach aches. That you can help, by the way, because you could force them to spew up. That's just how the Pokemon works. And they specifically say we can do that, but they don't give you the option to do that. And instead, they tell this poor Cramorant, let's meet back at the place later on after we do another 40 minutes worth of stuff. So this poor Cramorant is waddling back to the crime scene in misery because you can actually find him later on. He's halfway back. He's like, oh, I'll get there eventually. Don't worry about me. Like this poor guy is like dying just for you to eventually go, oh, yeah, where is it? We have no idea. Oh, it's in the Cramorant, right? Let's check. And it's in the Cramorant. And it's like, I could have saved myself over an hour of gameplay. Let me just, hey, buddy, you have, even if it wasn't a mystery, like, dude, you have a stomach ache. Let me at least help you hurl so you feel better. Oh, look, there's the item. Well, what do you know? How did that get there? I don't know. Well, now you have a mystery. How did it get there? That's not the mystery. The mystery is where's the item? And it's just like,
hmm
come on, it's there. Anyway, that's my little rant on that. But
No, no, you're good. You're good. Oh, um, I'm totally lost the thread of how we got to here, in all honesty.
talking about quitting games too early.
Oh, that's what it was. Thank you. It's like I was like listening, I'm like, yeah, yeah, I'd be annoyed at that too. How did we get here? Okay. Um, so oh yeah, quitting games are yeah, I guess we're both guilty of it though. I mean I do it more often than I care to admit. With like even what is it recently? I started finally playing Splatoon 3, even though I got it for Christmas like a year or two ago or whenever Splatoon 3 came out. Played it for like 10 minutes and I'm like, this is fine. And then I put it down. Granted, part of that was also my kid was awake, so I couldn't really play, and like really devote attention to it with a toddler running around. But it still is the fact that it wasn't captivating me when really I should be taking more time and really getting to know the mechanics of the game before I make that judgment. But in a complete hairpin left turn, we're going to take a completely different turn on this. You mentioned before with Premium Edition that you all care about game history. So I was more, it's something I'm passionate about too. Listeners know I've done full episodes on it. So I wanted to dive a little bit into that and kind of how you personally first got interested in game history. Like when did you first started getting like noticing like, oh, this shit's really cool. Like, well, what can I do to help preserve it? That kind of thing.
So I grew up with video games from the very beginning. I was born into a household with an Atari 800 and a Commodore 128. So I loved video games from the get-go, and my uncle was so big into it. He had a software store, PC, or as we called it then, IBM and IBM compatible. Apple, and you know, wasn't consoles. Atari, Commodore. It was more the computer side, the Amiga,
Hmm.
and just loved games. And I got a lot of my love for 'em from him. And I never got rid of my games. I kept every game I owned, and I just always just built upon it. And I loved seeing as games change because growing up with Generation 2, and playing Generation 1, and then into the birth of the NES and Master System into Gen 3, and just seeing every generation getting better and better, I really appreciated where it started, and I started to realize, kids stopped caring.
Hmm.
And I noticed this probably the biggest during the PlayStation, Saturn, and 64 generation, when so many people were introduced to RPGs with Final Fantasy VII. And I was like, yeah, Final Fantasy VII is okay, but the earlier ones are better. And I can't play those. Those aren't graphically exciting. Those are 2D.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, but they're better stories. They're awesome gameplay. You're not going to try them because yeah, no. And that was only a generation ago. I was like, what the heck? That was the only last generation. And I started as it went on. I noticed more and more kids didn't appreciate the older stuff, and now it might be a little bit different because of like NSO and there's compilations. But I don't know how, like, if the Mega Man Legacy Collection is selling to newer kids or if it's selling to people like us that grew up with Mega Man that want to replay those games. I don't know. I don't know the sales demographic, but as I started getting into collecting more and looking at the history and looking at all the forgotten systems, and I realized how many games, especially starting last generation and definitely this generation, that are released physically are not complete. Uh, the whole DLC, and even when DLC was a thing, a lot of games got Game of the Year editions that included the DLC on the
Yep.
disc. And last generation, it was just Game of the Year edition was the same disc with a code, and I'm like, this so much of this is not preserved, and it was annoying me. And it annoys other people too. I have some good friends that are really die hard in finding the best versions of games and stuff, and it's sad that we have to do that. And especially now, talking with developers and having friends that are developers, I don't want their work to be lost. So one of the things with premium is when we're talking with developers, and because we release games slowly, we will hold off to as much as we can on a release until the game is complete. And that way we can help preserve the developer's ideal version of the game uh, for them.
Hmm.
And like one of our first games signed was a robot named Fight. And when we signed it, we said, "Hey, we'd love to launch with this game." And they said, "Well, just so you know, I have some additional content that's free update that's coming out at a later time." And we said, "All right, well, let's delay our launch then. Let's delay at least releasing this game until that's done. We want that on the card because if we didn't, then that content would be lost when the servers eventually went down."
Yep.
So we have continued to include all DLC, whether it be free or paid, or any content patches on each of our releases, with the caveat that we can't guarantee that it'll always be complete on cart because if a bug is found, in 2 years and they patch that one bug, um, we're not going to instantly release the new version of the cart. But that's like the one little caveat because it could happen. It hasn't happened yet, but it could potentially happen. And we've actually had developers make special versions for our physicals or add stuff for our physicals that are exclusive. We had like Pigeon Dev Games Collection. The music on the physical is actually different than the digital version. You have two different soundtracks. Uh, you know, some games have been enhanced for the physical,
Hmm.
or the physical has spurred the developer to enhance the game. So one of our games that's up for pre-order right now, Lonesome Village, came out. Great, fantastic game. And because of the physical, the developers have actually gone back to the game. They're working on their third game. They went back to it to make sure the Switch version was even better than it was at release, like touching it up, making it a little sharper, making it run better because they're so excited about the physical and they want to make sure that the best version of that game is preserved and out there.
Hmm.
And I was like, that's awesome. So that applies to the digital version too, which is great. But the physical is what helps spur that, and I love that. We have some games that are coming up down the road that we've been waiting for more content, and they're like, oh yeah, like we'll even include like special early access items that are only for early access people. Like we'll put that on the card. We'll preserve those items too, for you. Like yes, like yeah, absolutely. We want as complete can be, to preserve it, so that if you buy one of our titles, premiumeditiongames.com, you get the full game. You get the games like Mighty Fight Federation have the paid DLC. Ran Your Parade, the paid DLC is there, so you don't have to worry about it. And I wish every company did that. I wish every release did that, because I think a lot of younger people, or even people who have quote unquote embraced the digital future, if you will, don't care because they're like, oh, by the time the servers go down, I've moved on. And maybe you have. Maybe you will never touch that game again. Great. But if you ever want to share it with your children or your grandchildren, you never will be able to, at least not in its complete form. And that's the way I look at it.
Well, I think that's why I get so riled up about game history and game preservation in general is just because it's you don't know what people are going to care about. Like the reality of it is like you could say like, yo, we don't need any of this stuff, but like if you look at like film history and film preservation, like the vast majority of the earliest years of the film industry are lost. Like what is it, 80-90% of it are just gone. Like we'll never get it back. Every known copy, at least as of now, has been destroyed or lost to time or somewhere, um, for the most part. And games, we don't have that. I mean, granted, it is still pretty damning with what's been going on with, like the Video Game History Foundation released that report a couple months ago about how
Hmm.
it was something like 80% of
87.
all 87% of all games are not available on current platforms. 87% is just it's like, and listen, I get that you can't make every single game available on every single platform, but the thing is that the fact that you can't even buy some of these when they could be available on a platform, it's wild. And the fact that people's go-to response is always like, well, just pirate it, who cares about this? Like that's not the point though. Like you shouldn't have to resort to uh activity of dubious intentions, illegal activity, Whether you think it's morally right, that's a different story, but you shouldn't have to legally you shouldn't have to do something illegal just to preserve game history. The fact that game like piracy and ROMs and all that other stuff, which by the way, listeners, I have no issue with. Just to be clear, I emulate games as well, but you shouldn't have to rely on hobbyists to preserve game history. Like, and the hobbyists are doing fantastic work. That's not even to take anything away from them, but that shouldn't be the end all be all. There should be something done, and it's not, which is why companies like Premium Edition and others, and the competitors I will not name, uh, do what they do. You guys try to preserve these small indie titles, and otherwise would be lost of time. Like, how many games disappear off of iPhones and off of app stores every single day without anyone knowing that they're even gone? Who knows if it's, like, just because you don't give two shits about that mobile game, or you don't give two shits about, whatever WiiWare title after the Wii shop closed down, doesn't mean that someone doesn't, and doesn't mean that it could have had a much bigger influence on games than you realize, stuff like that. Like, there's lots of things that I get, I get really worked up about. So game history is always been something I'm passionate about.
No, you're 100% right. Absolutely. A game that you may not care about, someone else does, or a game you care about, someone else may not. And the fact that, pirates and emulation is not the answer. It is an answer, but it, like you said, it shouldn't be the answer. And that's, I love these compilations that they've been putting out, and they've been, a lot of game companies are trying to get their back catalogs on there, and thankfully we're seeing a lot of backwards compatible systems, which is fantastic to allow those games. But there's also that caveat. For example, um, let's say New Super Mario U Deluxe, right? You got New Super Mario Brothers U and you got New Super Luigi U all
Yep.
together on the Switch. Fantastic. Absolutely. I still think it should have been New Super Mario All Stars with the other three games, but that's besides the point. You still get those games. But, and here's the but, it's not the Wii U version, because the Wii U version had different components like the ability to make the blocks and to use the gamepad. So while the game is playable on modern consoles and current consoles, it is not the same version as the originally released version, and that version is locked to the Wii U. Both games are locked to the Wii U, and
Hmm.
forever will be, or at least potentially forever will be. So while you can play a version of those games, you're not playing the intended original version of those games, and that is locked. So that, I mean, I'd be happy if every game is playable at least in some form, but that is that other caveat where it's like, oh well, this is a, like the 3DS games like Metopia that came over to the Switch, or Sushi Striker came to the Switch. You know, that's great that they're there, but they're not the original designed versions. It was designed for the 3DS to use the stereoscopic 3D, to use the features of the 3DS like the touchpad,
Hmm.
in those ways, and that's lost. It's not it's the same game, but it's also not at the same time. So there's a lot of rabbit holes that you could technically jump through on this topic.
I mean, it's a lot. That kind of lends to the question of, like, what is actually game preservation too? Like, what needs to be done in order to preserve a game? And that's what I steal this a lot from the Game History Foundation, but I think it's really a good way to describe game preservation. Is that there's like three aspects of it, three pillars: physical, digital, and contextual. Um, like, you can buy a game physically, and as you were talking about before, Barry, how, like, just because you buy a game physically doesn't mean you have the game. Like, Animal Crossing New Horizons is my go-to example. That game at launch is very different than how it is now. Extremely
Yep.
different. There's so many updates and patches, and don't get me wrong, I love it, but that game isn't necessarily preserved, because if the servers go down and you can't update that game, you're left with the original one, which is fine, but there's a lot of changes made to that game. Um, and it's the same with almost every other game. And so, like, just because you even have a physical version of a game, and with the examples you were giving, Barry, how, like, not every version is the same with the Mario the Mario U and stuff like that. Like, the Wii U version is the original and definitive, and There's stuff that's changed in later releases and shit like that. Like there's so much that goes into it, and that's where the contextual part of preservation really has to come in and play. Because like, yeah, you can have both versions of that, but you need the context to know that it changed. Otherwise, you just think that's the definitive version when it's not. And that could be the
So,
case for anything. Also not even talking about specifically different updates to games, but in terms of the history around games, like I bring this example up all the time, but with Animal Crossing New Horizons, if you say you had literally every update possible on a cartridge, say the type of game in there is not an issue, that is perfectly preserved. Every single update ever is on that cartridge. You will know if that's all you have, though. You don't know the context of how much Animal Crossing New Horizons meant to people during the pandemic and how it connected people for an entire like 2 to 3 years, like that. Like for 2 years, like 2020 and 2021, it was one of the largest games of all time. Like there's so many, especially in 2020. Um,
hmm
I mean, hell, even go back to Pokemon Go in the summer of 2016, where, yeah, Pokemon Go is still popular now, but you had to be there in the summer of 2016, where all of a sudden it was like parks were packed because every person and their mother was playing Pokemon Go and walking around their neighborhood and exploring different places, and how it like brought up business for local businesses, and it helped them make some extra money that they might not have had beforehand, because now there's more people stopping there for Pokemon. I mean, local business advertised their place as Pokestops. Like that, it was a thing. And that's why I get so like worked up over game history, because there's it's a lot more than just like, it means a lot more than just, oh, I can play this game in 20 years. That is a huge part of it, but there's so many more elements to it, like how, like, the people who study film, the people who study literature, like, you need to study the classics so you can, I shouldn't say you need to. It's good though to study the classics in any medium in order to advance the medium even further, to see where it's been so you can figure out where it needs to go next. And if
hmm
we don't preserve games, you lose that.
Well, it's one of those funny things you mentioned because if you look at like an emulation list, like you got like, oh, I got a series of ROMs, I'm gonna go play Mario 3. You're probably gonna see like multiple versions in a ROM list
Yeah.
because they revised the game without telling anybody, and you just got Mario 3 on the NES. You didn't know what version you had, and the very slight changes. You really didn't experience that. You just played Mario 3. And it wasn't until games were dumped that we're like, oh, there were versions of this. Well, fun fact, that's still the case with modern kind games, especially Nintendo. What I mean by that is Nintendo will re-release games like a second printing or a third printing with all updates. They just don't reprint the same cartridge. So, for example, if you got Mario Tennis Aces on the Switch when it launched, you got a great game. It was fun, you know. Maybe it could use a little more content, but still fun. But then for over a year, they would add new tennis players, new characters to play as. They were free. They just added those characters. It was like 12 characters or something, or 14 characters were added. A huge chunk to the roster. But if you still have that initial cartridge and the servers go down, you can still play the game just fine, but you don't have that added content. But they did reprint the game, and you can get a copy of the game with all those characters that were free on the cartridge. So when the servers go down, those characters are still there, but only if you have the right cartridge. So it is happening. Animal Crossing, you can get a cartridge with a more updated content on it. You may not
Oh,
have the newest one, but you can. So they have been actually preserving a lot of that, just not making a big deal about it. You have to find the right revision on the cartridge. But yeah,
I did
so
not know that.
this is a thing. This is where the rabbit hole just keeps going down.
In in your opinion, or like, what's something that you would like to see done more in game preservation?
I'd like to see a bigger push for physical preservation
Hmm.
because digital preservation is nice, but digital preservation is fine too. Don't get me wrong, but it has to be both. That but the thing is with digital is tied to a server or it's tied to an account. It's tied to things that can go away. that can, a company goes under, they don't want to pay for it. Look, we've seen Nintendo shut down the 3DS and the Wii and the Wii U eShops.
Hmm.
Sony did the PS3, or no, they did the PSP, and they were threatening the PS3 and the Vita, and people barked at them. So they're still up right now, but they probably won't be for much longer. Um, this is how Microsoft is killing theirs as well, or they did kill some of their older stuff. I think 360 is knocked out now. So I would prefer physical preservation for that very reason, because it's not tied to an account. Anyone can enjoy it. You can lend it to somebody. You can just play. And I'd love to see games, every game if possible, preserved in some way. Do I think that's ever going to happen? No. And
It's
here's why.
not necessarily even realistically feasible with like, you know,
It's feasible. It just takes people to care. And the reason for that, the reason why I said that is physical game production is expensive, especially like on the Switch, where cartridges are more expensive than discs. And that's the reason you see so many physical games where it requires a big download, where it has, just a little bit. They get the smallest card to have a physical in quotes, but it requires a download for the rest, because they're not being they're not being smart about it in the preservation sense. They're being smart about it in the profit sense.
yeah.
They can make more profit if they buy the cheaper card, as opposed to buying the more expensive card and getting the whole game physically preserved, because they don't care. They have their own service, and even then, there's source code that's lost. Like Panzer Dragoon Saga on the Saturn, the source code is lost. Okami, when that game came out in the PS2, Clover Studios lost that code. I don't know how, but they lost it. So when Okami came for the Wii, they had to rebuild that game from the ground up to get it on the Wii,
Kingdom
which is,
Hearts HD, same story.
yep, yep. So when you have things like that, like if you're losing source code, then that shows you that digital preservation is not foolproof. It's an option, and it should be an option. But physical preservation is foolproof. And the reason I say that is because if you print 10,000 discs, and have the ability to print more, that game would only die if all 10,000 discs magically exploded. like they all got destroyed. Like the reason Panzer Dragoon Saga is expensive is because there's so few copies out there, but people can still play that game because it exists. And I've saw one person counter what I just said with about physical, saying, "Oh, well then if you have physical, what happens when your Blu-ray drive dies?" And my answer to that is simple. There's a billion Blu-ray drives.
And there's
Like,
always
they're
going to
everywhere.
be someone who's like a independent like tinkerer or whatever you want to call it, who finds solutions in the future. I think ideally a good combination of the two, in my personal opinion, because like you want both. That's the reality of it. You
Mhm.
never want one or the other, because all physical eventually shit deteriorates. Like as much as I love my NES cards, eventually they're going to deteriorate. Discs get data rot, shit like that. So
Only older discs, like Blu-rays, it's really hard to damage
Oh yeah,
Blu-rays.
yeah, and I mean, but like PS1, did they get data rot?
PS1, Saturn, like the early Sega CD,
Yeah,
Jaguar CD, like the
and
early
I
CDs.
and even then, they're gonna like if you treat them well, they're gonna last a while. Data rot takes a while, but you still need physical preservation or digital preservation for something so you can make new copies if shit gets lost. With that
Absolutely.
said, you need backups of those digitals. Otherwise, you run into the situations like we mentioned with Square Enix and with Clover.
Yeah,
What
Clover
Clover?
did
Yeah.
Okami.
Um. It you need backups for that shit. But we do have to start wrapping this up. I know you said you didn't
Yes.
want to go too much past 10, and we are already past 10. I'm
We're
not
having a good
surprised.
conversation.
Yeah, I've been enjoying this, man, and I'm happy that because listeners, I had mostly planned to ask about premium edition stuff. Which don't get me wrong, I want you to promote because you are giving me your time, and I want to make sure that you can promote some of the stuff that you're working on. But at the same time, I didn't want it to just be a full hour long conversation about just I don't know, like almost like an advertisement.
Mhm.
So I really enjoyed this conversation talking about your thoughts on game history and like gaming in general, modern to now. So dude, thank you so much for joining me. This has been a lot of fun.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
So before we wrap all this up, where can my good listeners find you, and what would you like to promote? What social medias, all that good stuff? Shout it all out. Here's your platform for it.
Sure. So if you would like to follow me on Twitter, Blue Sky, or Fuse, or Discord, even, you can find me at Hawk Hellfire. Send me a message. Love to talk video games. Just love to be part of the community. For Nintendo Fuse, you can find us at nintendofuse.com, and you can find us on youtube.com/nintendofuse every other Monday night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern. You can find us live on the podcast. You can find us on Twitter and all other social media platforms at Nintendo Fuse. And for premium edition games, you can find us at premiumeditiongames.com, where right now you could pre-order all of our Series 7 titles. That includes Anuchard, Lonesome Village, and the fantastic Sunshine Anthology, as well as some of our NES games like Oratorio. On top of that, we have an entire list of games that are in stock right now, that are not part of the pre-order programs of our previous series that you can absolutely pick up and play, like the Pigeon Dev Games Collection, Mighty Fight Federation, Wonderling DX, Rain in Your Parade, Rack and Ruin, and a bunch more. So definitely give a check out to those. They're all great games. You can find us on social media, Twitter, Premium Edition 1, that's numerically 1. Everywhere else, Premium Edition Games. Both Nintendo Views and Premium Edition have a Discord, so feel free to join those, and you'll find me in each of those. And yeah, just thank you so much for your time and listening, and I hope you enjoyed this conversation.
I definitely did, so I hope they did as well. Um, as usual for myself, you can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at StillLoadingPod on all of them. If you want to email me, you can email me stillloadingcontact@gmail.com. If you want to support the show, you can do so in a number of ways. Please give it a 5-star rating and review on whichever podcasting app or service you use, because it helps me feel warm and fuzzy, and I like feeling warm and fuzzy. You can also support the show monetarily at over at patreon.com/stillloadingpod for $1 a month. You'll get all the episodes a few days earlier with better audio quality, as well as access to patron voting rights, which helps guide the direction of the show. If you want to help pick future topics, you can do that for as little as $1 a month. At the $4 level, you get everything I mentioned at the $1 level, plus access to 2 mini bonus episodes every month that covers a variety of topics. Sometimes they're music episodes like SNES selections or Genesis jams, or just kind of little music episodes, just highlighting some of my favorite tracks on the systems. Also, I've been doing this series on the Gamer 5 portable system, which is one of those wonderful handhelds that features 220 games in one, all of totally great quality. Like if you ever wanted to play Curly Monkey and its sequel, Curly Monkey 2, this is the series for you to find out all about that. um and then the last tier that I have is the $5 level, which is everything I mentioned prior at the $1 and $4 levels, plus access to Still Bonding, which is my monthly James Bond podcast where me and a bunch of friends bond over 007. Those episodes are 2.5 to 3.5 hours long, and we are all the way up to the Timothy Dalton era by the time you're hearing this. So there is a lot of content for you for $5. So please go consider checking that out. Patreon.com/stillloadingpod. And of course, I want to shout out my friends over at the Bit by Bit Foundation. The Bit by Bit Foundation is a nonprofit organization whose mission is to put video games and video game consoles in the hands of kids receiving inpatient care at hospitals. So if you want to support them, go to bitbybitfoundation.org and consider donating. And that is all the time I have for you on this episode of Still Loading. Barry, thank you once again for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a blast.
And with all that said, listeners, I will see you all next time.